Hey all, I'm Chris Hollywood, and this is a brief overview of a procedural generation method that I've been working on in Unreal Engine 4 for the past few days. So let's take a look. We're gonna play the level and see what I'm doing. So at the moment, this is how it's being generated. It's a 6x6 grid, and it's going to generate rooms based on some blueprints stuff that I've done, which I'll show in a sec. So you can keep generating it. There's some logs on the left for testing purposes. Alright, here's a good example of a problem at the moment, because it's quite basic, is that it doesn't check for stray rooms that are not part of the main one. So this small 1x1 block, or this small 2x1 block. As I said, it's pretty simple, but it's a work in progress, and we'll find some methods to see if we can attach it to this, or if it's not really a problem with what I want to do with this. So let's take a look at the blueprint stat itself. Open up blueprint. Alright, so here's just the start. It's going to set the variables that I want to change. So it's going to set the grid size, it's going to set how many floors I want to remove, and it's going to set how far I want the floor pieces to move and how big the individual squares on the grid are. So let's say I change this to 12, not 126, although it would still work. 12, and then let's triple the amount here. I'm going to go with that, then we're going to hit play, move up and generate, and as you can see it works fine. Yep, works completely fine, and walking and flying through it. The lighting's a little off because there's no lighting in this map, and the light maps haven't been put into these simple walls and floors. Ideally I want to have, well, not ideally, but I'm going to have art pieces, and it's going to look like a full fantasy automatically generated room, and it's going to have torches randomly placed in barrels and stuff like that. But at the moment we need to make sure that the generation method itself works. So I'm just going to see how it works. So set the variables that I want to change, and this is just to delete all the floors and walls so I can test it, and let's get right in. So this is it. Put into simple blocks, it's going to set the variables, reset them, so every time I generate it again it starts from scratch. It's going to populate the array with a full floor, so the entire grid is filled with a floor piece. Then it's going to randomly remove floor pieces. Now it's going to place them in the world. So first it's going to go through, we'll get to this in a second, and it's going to check that there is a floor valid because we've just removed some, and then it's going to spawn the floor piece. And then once that is created the floor piece, it's going to move one to the right on the grid, and it's going to increment the number by 1 and the spawn position by 128, because that's what we have here. And because the size of the model is 128, it's going to be seamless as it spawns the next one. Alright, let's go back. So it's going to keep doing this until it reaches a multiple of the grid size. So if it's a multiple of 12, once it does it 12 times, it's going to come to here, and it's going to ask if it's ready to move up a row. And then once it has, it's going to move up. So we'll have a row of 12, and then a new row begins. A row of 12, a new row begins, another 12, and eventually you get a full grid. So once it's completed all of the floor pieces and checked everything, it's going to create the walls. We're going to reset the variables so we can reuse those, and then it's going to run a loop based on the amount of elements within this array. It does the same thing as before. This is just to check whether to move up a row, and it's going to start at 0, 0, the starting position of the grid, and then it's going to check, is there a floor here? If so, we're going to execute this command. It's going to check if there's a floor to the right, because plus it's going to look in the array, it's going to determine from here that there is a floor, and then it's going to check one to the right. So by checking the element to its right within the array and that there is a floor there, it will not spawn a wall, because if there's a floor to its right, it will not spawn a wall to the right, and if it detects there is not, it will spawn a wall. It's going to do the same for the top, left and bottom. For the top, it's going to check the variable ifloor multiple, because if in a 12 by 12 grid, for example, it's going to check 12 along, which is directly above it. And because that's the case, it's going to check 12 along, and it will ask, is there a floor here? If so, do not spawn a wall, and if there is no floor, spawn a wall. It's going to do it for the left bottom, it's going to spawn the wall, move the position number, and it's going to repeat this entire process until all the walls have been spawned, and all of the floors and walls are put into an array. Alright, so that's just how it works, and we'll take a look at it one more time. So let's make it something a bit more sillier. Let's say 18. And then, I don't know, 80. Yeah, let's close that. Oh no, compile it. Then close it. Play. Move up and generate. There you go. So, just give a brief in-view example of what it's doing. It's spawn the wall, and then it's going to check the floor to the right. It hasn't, so it spawns the wall there. And then for the top, yeah, there is no floor here, so it spawns a wall on the top. Anyway, I'm Chris Hollywood, and that was a very short video of what I want to be doing. Hopefully, with some weeks of work, this will be a fully made fantasy room that automatically generates, and with some additional work, ideally by looking at algorithms and some research, we'll make some additional rooms that all link together, and perhaps we can have rooms that automatically detect stragglers and link them into the main room. That was an error of a smaller room. It doesn't seem to have that issue with bigger rooms, because the likelihood of that happening is pretty rare. Oh. Usually the issues occur on the corners, but it works for what I want to do. Anyway, thanks for watching.